welcome to my talk about Federated Future, Reimagining Banking with Strategic API Management. My name is Tim Biedenkapp, and I want to take you with me for the next 20 minutes to talk about the Federated Future. With this in mind, I learned that if you give a good presentation, you always should, in the beginning, tell the audience what they can learn out of this talk. And therefore, I'm opening my talk, and I want you to enable to convince your business units to join your API program, because I assume most of the people that are going to listen or see that talk are usually in an API competence center or have a strong background in API programs. And based on my experience, most of the API programs are lacking in adaptation because of the business side and not by implementing great technology. So with this said, I'm Tim. I'm the director of technology at Adorsys, or you can call me also the CTO. I have a professional background in enterprise and information architecture. I'm a strong believer in the fundamentals of people, process, and technology. Only if the three aspects work quite well together, an approach can work. And beside that, I'm also frequently recording the podcast. It's called Tapas and Pretzels, where I and the beloved David Martinez are sharing some thoughts about the AI and API world. Just a few words about Adorsys, what we are doing. Adorsys is a professional service company. We are basically an integrator or architects for the finance world. We do advise our customers in strategic API programs or do also API implementation. We are product independent vendor. Even so, I'm doing this talk right now with a partner. It's Apidays. But we are still a general independent advisor and have seen multiple projects when it comes to API management programs. And I'll try to give you today a little overview of what I have learned during my journey in the API world, especially when it comes to federated API management. So let's go to the slides. Just a general overview, why API management is so important and why it should be considered a strategic approach in your company. And I know everyone that's listening to it has already some type of API management in place, but maybe these figures and facts might help you to convince the last business unit. So in general, API management or APIs in the fintech world, the market is already 180 billion. So it's a quite huge market and there's much to gain. And it's a shame if you're not part of it. There are almost 30,000 fintech startups in that space that are focused on APIs. So if you consider creating another fintech, you're more than welcome. I think 30,001 is also a great number. If you look on the biggest player in the market, it's Visa. They have $500 billion market valuation already. So you can really grow by just providing APIs and infrastructure for payments. So it's definitely worth to take a deeper look into it. A recent report of Gartner, Cloudflare just stated that 58% of all Cloudflare traffic is related to APIs, which is an impressive number in my opinion. And another report by Gartner is that shadow APIs create probably the biggest security threats. So shadow APIs, for those of you who haven't heard of the term, is basically an API that is not monitored or governed by some governance unit or API gateways in that case. And if you have an unobserved API, this is probably the biggest threat. And while we're talking about threats, APIs are the biggest attack vector since 23 or 22 in the overall attack vector sector. And keep in mind that each and every API has at least 230 issues per API. So an issue is in that case not necessarily a security breach or anything. It could be also an issue in like formatting or not filling out the right headers or input parameters. But if you take 230 issues at least per API, takes this times the amount of fintechs we have seen, and then you get an understanding how big that threat might be. And if you think of those fintechs that probably handle all your payment transactions, the settlement, giving information about your bank account, or summarizing your bank accounts and give you some advisory, you rather make sure that you do try to fix and make those APIs as secure as possible. And if somebody knows a great way to settle some payments without paying actually for it, please let me know. My contact details are are on the slides. So, facts and figures. I think I have a personal belief that something that I learned while studying is the basic concept of divide and conquer is a well-known concept in IT, and it's actually, I think it's a term that was created by Machiavelli, so it's a pretty old term from the business side. If you want to make something successful, you need to solve the problem by dividing and conquering smaller problems. And this is still true. And we see currently two trends in the market that actually really forcing, again, this divide and conquer principle, but in on a new nice terms. So one great example here is data mesh that probably most of you have heard of. So data mesh is basically the concept of treating data as a product and see data as a really valuable data stream. And I see nowadays most people have recognized since LLMs and AI is here that data has really impact, and that data should be treated really well as it would be a product that has a lot of value. And to do so, there's always the concept of ownership. So it doesn't matter if it's data or API, you need some owner for the concept. It's what you're offering. It has to be treated as a product and not as a project. So that's something that continuously evolve and can be incremented and improved over time. And not something that is defined start and end date like a project. And because an API or a data product is never been done, it is something that has a life cycle to it. Also, people like if they have some kind of self-service infrastructure, and not that they have any for each and every API that you have to consume, or a data product that you want to consume. You don't want to write an email asking for someone, can you please grant me some permissions so that I can use the API or your data product. And with the self-service infrastructure in mind, it's like really something people can do, produce and consume without having too many manual steps in between. Another thing is data mesh is emphasizing on is federated decision-making models. So basically, data mesh and the concept say, hey, you need to have a federated governance in the organization so that each and every organization can define the products and as their expectations, but according to some centralized standards, which are defined in a central governance way. This is probably one of the well-known concepts where you see, again, it's federated, it's about divide and conquer central rules, but this locally execution of the rules. On the other hand, we have banking as a service, which might of you have heard of. It's also a new trend. As I've shown the last slide before, 30,000 startups are in the fintech section. So it seems that there are many customer wishes which cannot be filled with the existing banks, and there's always a sweet spot for fintech or startup to provide the value to some customer needs which banks weren't able to satisfy before. And here you see on the right-hand side that how a typical banking as a service or the new embedded finance is working. In the end, you have some core banking system which provide some general ledger capabilities or other financial products, and those will get combined with capabilities from different banks or supply companies in different directions to provide, in the end, the customer need that is satisfied, often not by the bank itself anymore, by a third-party vendor that is combining APIs to who they need. And again, it's a divide and conquer approach. Basically, there is the need in the market. We have so many customer segments and so many customer wishes that cannot be satisfied from a single institution. So institutions providing just core capabilities and let others assemble the product in the speed that the customers need. Um, yeah. So this just like to set the scene, why the concept of divide and conquer is a crucial one. Yeah. So how does a modern API world look like in an enterprise? So I think most companies, they start off with one business unit. As you see the first pillar here is basically you have some. Don't look too deep a look on the product icons. It's just like a general hint that you have multiple gateway technology provider here that are in a business unit, and that the business unit uh, is probably has one requirement which is not relevant for the others as well. So the other business units could have a different need. For example, you can say I have one unit which is dealing with governance or governmental approaches, where they say, okay, we need security is the most important thing, and its stability, and you need to have the product lifecycle is quite long. In comparison to other segments where you have an end user as a customer, and the end user is expecting each and every day an update on the latest and greatest technologies. He wants to see an update in an app store on his phone. So the requirements are completely different. And this is one case. And the other case is actually what is going to happen if a company is doing merger and acquisition, and if you have to integrate existing business units, existing technology stacks into your company. And then you have multiple business units which are responsible for business, and then you have the clash of technologies, and it's really hard to convince an existing unit to join your API program, your API standards, when you say, hey, you have to use gateway A, B, or C, because it's the standard of the company. There will be huge hesitations from the existing business unit, because there is no value in for them to either adapt to something really expensive or something which is not filling their requirements for security. And on the hand, you're probably from the API competence center, you too are to establish a central API governance that you can deliver an API customer developer experience for your developers that your APIs will be adapted from the market, because in the end, each and every API is a good API that is used. So the best well-written defined API that is used by nobody is not a good API. So a good API makes an API that is used. And therefore, here as an API competence center, try to set some standards, but try not to limit the business as its own, because the business has to focus on delivering customer satisfaction. Therefore, you need to find a way how you can offer the business the degree of freedom that they're looking for to deliver their customer needs. And I have seen this in the past quite often, that the needs were different from what the competence center central unit could deliver. And therefore, we came to the problem how to solve that. So I said, like earlier, I'm a big fan of people, process, and technology. So I think we covered the technology and the part already. But what's about the process? How can we make the process viable, that you can enable the business side to work on their gateway they like? So the answer is obvious: is federated. Federated is the answer. And let me explain you why I do like the technology from API, which I think is a great provider. So API has an API management solution. API is not a gateway provider. They're just like focusing on delivering a federated API management. And they came up with the idea of having a control plane on the left side, on the green side here. The control plane is basically your central governance portal, where you can define rules or requirements in terms of standards and security. And each and every API that will be deployed gonna have to pass the control plane. The control plane will do the policy enforcement for you, checking your API rule sets, maybe run some API linter styles. And once it's passed, the API then will be deployed on the respective gateway. So from a developer, basically you're a developer on the left side saying, I want to deploy a new API on my gateway A, B, or C. So you publish the API by the control plane. The control plane checks the validity, and then the control plane will do actually the provisioning of that API on the respective gateway. So the control plane has all the metadata. It will deploy the API on the gateway. The actual data will run through the data plane on the respective gateway. So the control plane will never interfere with your actual traffic, so it will be never bottleneck. It's just the meta element. But if you deploy all the APIs that you have with a single control plane, this tool will get quite mighty because it will see and know all the APIs that you have independent on which gateway it is. And for API, that doesn't matter if that's a Kong gateway or an XY gateway or any other tool. It has the adapter built in to provision your APIs, to enforce your standards, and deploy it on the respective gateway with the perfect provisioning of security settings. And then you have basically a collection in API about all your APIs. You can build an API catalog, not a developer portal, a catalog. Basically, a catalog is something where it has all the APIs in the respective of which API gateway. So you probably might have different developer portals out of that catalog. So a subset of a catalog is then in the other developer portal, which makes it quite easy because then you have here the whole list, and then you can spin out of API as many API portals or developer portals that you need. So you can select, I don't know, several APIs from different gateways, merge them into a new developer portal, which is a really mighty opinion, in my opinion, a really mighty tool to help you spin up probably also new products or brands of a company. But we'll get to that later. With this tool in mind, let me talk about some customer success stories that we have and where we actually applied the concept of federated API management. Well, I call this the new cloud, of course, new API program. It's quite often the case that existing companies deciding to go to the cloud because not every company is born cloud native. And they have had on-premise gateways and now adapting to a cloud native API gateway. And I'm pretty sure most of the companies are adapting right now Azure and AWS or having multiple clouds in the way. And it's always the question for an API competence center, how can you really get a consistent view on all the APIs that you have? And while introducing new cloud vendors, they're always considering re-updating the API strategy, the API guidelines, and so on, and to figure out what is the best way to deploy the API on the respective gateways. And their federated API management helps because you still have one control plane that where it's just like, hey, you have a new gateway option that's now Azure Gateway, for example, and that can be deployed with API there. So for the developers, nothing changed beside a parameter of the target gateway. And for you as the API competence center, it's quite easy for you to keep the overview and also provide to your upper management the APIs that are in the company. Then another great story is the unified API catalogs. As I said earlier, it's sometimes you as a competence center try to get an understanding. How many APIs do we have? Where are they? And can we provide them on the marketplace? So I call this are we API first? And how many APIs are we? Because it's often we had that in the past that basically the upper management was selling, hey, how many APIs do we have? What do we have APIs that are doing the similar job because you're spending so much money on similar APIs? And also, how many APIs do we have in total, the total cost of ownership? And this is an answer where usually everyone runs through the gateway, get out some spreadsheets, and try to satisfy the needs from the upper management. And it's quite easy if you have one central API catalog, not developer, but like catalog, to enforce your governance and report on the API usage. Brand jobs is also, we have existing customers who's like, okay, we would like to rebrand our company or try to test a new market segment, customer segment, by just releasing our APIs or a subset of our APIs into a new developer portal. And then we call this the brand shop, the new cash cow, because it's the new cash cow. We try it out and it's quite easy to instead of having a big API migration, API routing concepts, you can easily say, hey, I take this subset and this API that is going to merge those APIs for you into one new portal. And I call this then the love or hate it projects. So basically, it depends how well your business units are connected and how strong the API competence there might be. I have seen occasions where actually one business unit was not in alignment with the API competence center because of lacking sponsorship or alignments, whatever. And the business unit was about to say, okay, we go to build our own API strategy here, and because it's not fitting our needs, and that was really hard for the API governance center, the competence center, like to really govern them all and to get them back again into one single monitoring aspects. And therefore, the business need was basically we cannot work with the existing API gateway because it's the legacy technology is so legacy and it's not working with our approaches. And to avoid those conflicts and discussions, it's always great to say, hey, business unit, feel free to use the API gateway of your choice. We can monitor and govern whatever you like, and it makes it easier to do accounting in between who has used how much traffic on which gateway. And with this in mind, I hope some of the arguments gonna help you to convince your business unit to join your API program by introducing Federated API Management. And feel free to contact us at either API or adorsys. Thank you for listening.